Welcome back to the channel, y'all. So, does your Fiero GT give the infamous and extremely embarrassing belt squeal when you start up? Well, if so, follow along with me today because I'm going to be going over a surefire way to get rid of that for good. So, stay tuned. Yes, the very annoying, very embarrassing Fiero GT belt squeal when you start the car up. So, if you have this, you probably already Google and probably already know what I'm going to be installing. And if not, you probably read the title or searched for it. But I'm going to be installing the Rodney Dickman idler setup. More or less, it's the root cause of the belt squeal is the alternator is loading up when you first start the car and there's just not enough belt wrap. The factory configuration, you're only getting about that much belt wrap around the alternator. If this was the alternator pulley, you're only getting about that much belt wrap. If that, it's more like that. So what this does is this will go in between the alternator pulley and it'll mount to the alternator pulley bracket, or the alternator bracket, and then it basically will allow you to get, if this was the alternator pulley again, you will get more like, I can't even get my hand around it, but you will get more something like that on belt wrap. So, in fact, I will show you. There's a sketch that comes with the drawing, or the instructions, that kind of show you how much more belt wrap you get. Okay, and that gives you an idea of where it goes. So, instructions come with it. I also opted, whether or not it actually will help, to get his since this is an 88, I got the 88 power pulley setup, which comes with new belts as well for the AC and the alternator and the water pump. So that's handy. Make sure you take note of what belts they use now, because it's no longer a factory size belt. What else comes with it? Well, you get the idler bracket. And then, if you've watched my previous video, I've already upgraded this to a 130 amp alternator. However, the pivot bolt, the top bolt for the alternator, is galled up in the bracket, and I was trying to replace it, and the head stripped out, so I had already went ahead and ordered a new bolt for that, as well as a new alternator bracket from the Fiero store, which a common point that these break, if I take this out of the bag, the factory ones are known to break because they are around the area where the alternator pivots and tightens up at, because it's just a little too thin. It's made of aluminum, and if you put a lot of belt tension on that belt, it's a lot of stress, and these are known to crack. This is a Fiero store model that's a little bit thicker, and when I get the old one out, I will try to show a comparison of that. So it's reinforced, which should help with the, well, you know, with the overall longevity. So this will be covering taking that out as well. To do this, you wouldn't actually necessarily need to take this out or the alternator, but because I'm doing this all in one, you're going to get the full experience, so you almost get an alternator install video in and of itself too. Another thing I'm going to be installing today is I'm going to be attempting to install, and I may segue this into a different video, but a new AC compressor clutch, because the compressor clutch on this car is slipping, so it's also squealing, and it's not cooling the car. So while I've got it all apart, I'm just going to try to get it all done. Tackle it as one. I may make this into 2 different videos though. So anyway, that being said, let me get set up and we'll get going. Alright, so we're going to be messing with the charging system. So obviously the first thing we're going to do is take an 8mm wrench and disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. Now, I guess if you could probably get away with this, with not doing this, if you weren't replacing the bracket as well. However, it's just good practice to go ahead and disconnect that. So that's out of the way. Next, while we got the car on the ground still, I'm going to go ahead and take what would normally be a 13mm socket and ratchet and undo the top bolt. However, since mine is stripped out, I need to use a 13mm bolt extractor. Pick those up. They typically, depending on how stripped out the bolt gets, end up being one-time use. It is what it is. And if I'm lucky, it'll start coming out. However, I think I need a short. This thing has been pretty tight. Matter of fact, I'm going to have to get a longer headed ratchet, handle ratchet, because this thing is on here pretty something fierce. So I'm going to be fighting this for a minute. Once I get this out, I'll move on to the next step. Okay, as you can see, that thing is pretty well galled up. That bolt's pretty much toast. It's hard to tell, but yeah, it looks like it was digging into the aluminum of the alternator bracket. So that being said, that's going in the trash. I always think ahead on stuff like this. Like, I knew I was probably going to need a new bolt, so I went ahead and ordered it. Don't try to save, $4. You'll end up hating yourself later because you'll end up having to stop and wait for the part to come in. So, got that done. Next, going to be breaking the passenger side rear wheel off. Get it loose, get the car up in the air, get the wheel off, and then the fender liner. So stay tuned and we'll get started on that. Alright, so a very important safety tip, make sure you got a wheel chock. Since we did jack up the drive wheel, just make sure you chock that side. That way the car can't roll forward, especially the side you're going to be working on. Alright, Now, my fender liner is not in the best shape, it looks like, but to do this, you're gonna want to get this one out the way. I've actually done it by just flipping these up, but because I'm also going to be doing the AC, I'm going to be taking this one off as well, so give me more room. To do this one, you really just, you can take a flathead screwdriver and just pop these little rivets out. This thing's already torn on mine, so I'm just gonna pop it out the way, but I will be taking it all the way out just to give myself some more room, which basically all you need is Phillips head, and I believe that's a 7mm, just like everything else on this car, to get the fender liner out. So hang on one second. All right, so I've got a Phillips head screwdriver. I'm going to remove all the Phillips head ones first, and then I'm going to take my impact and remove all the, to save myself some time, remove all the 7mm ones. So hang on one second. Okay, that's out. So I need to do some cleaning up in here, obviously. To get the rest of this shield off, there's there should be 4 more of these Phillips head screw rivets, but I think there's only 3 on my car. So I may have to, in fact, pop these because some of them are just so old that they don't want to come out. Just pull this out of the way. All right. Now there's all kinds of room for activities up in here. So let me get set up for the next step and I'll be right back. Okay, so because I upgraded my alternator and I upgraded my ground, I have a big ground strap going to the engine block right here that I have to remove. If you had the stock alternator, you wouldn't have to do this. That's a 15mm bolt there. It's a factory bolt. And then for this alternator here, you would also have to take a, let's see if I can get an angle on it. You can see where the wire leads. There's a 7mm bolt here that has the power wire to the battery, or the power terminal, and the other factory wiring. The factory pigtail style connector right there is already unhooked, so I just got to get those 2 wires undone, and then I'll be ready to drop the alternator. Okay, now the only thing holding in the alternator right now is this bolt here and the belt. So once I undo this bolt, I'm going to take it all the way out. I'll probably have to pry this back to loosen the belt, and then once the belt's out of the way, I should be able to pull the alternator out. So hold on one second. Okay, now before we get to taking the alternator bracket off, the directions state to tighten this lower bolt, because you are going to be removing one of the motor mount bolts, so you don't want the motor to shift. So I'm going to basically use my torque wrench and socket set that I use, because it's a 19mm bolt. So just use it like the same thing you were using to take off your lug nuts. Real quick, just gonna torque this thing down some. Of course, this is kind of difficult because it is so long. Nope. Okay, that should be good. Now, there are some bolts on top and on bottom we're going to have to take off. More or less what you want to do. I lose my balance. You can kind of look at the, if you have the new bracket. Yeah, new bracket. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I'm gonna take a look at the top two first. So I'm tired of laying on the ground. That. So it is kind of dark. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. There's one right there, and the one's right here. It is tight in there. I have to figure out what size those are, and you can see it. These other two. Maybe you can see them. I can't tell. If you can see where my fingers are pointing. Bottom two actually probably should be easier. Anyway, I'm gonna go figure out what size bolts those are, and I'll be back. All right, so I misspoke. The motor mount ones are 18s, not 19s. That's why I had so much play in it. Okay, so that one's an 18. The upper three, however, are all 15s. So I am actually gonna have to take a break because I'm gonna soak these in penetrating oil and not fight them. So this won't make a difference to y'all because I'm just going to edit it out. But I'm going to do that and take a break. So I'll be back. Quick word from our sponsors. No, not really. I'm not sponsored. I'm not even monetized. So I know a lot of people, we use WD-40 as like penetrating oil. That's not really what it's meant for. It can work in that case. I prefer normal use PB Blaster, but on tough stuff that's hard to get out, I found that even PB Blaster won't break some stuff loose, especially like exhaust studs. This stuff, however, it's called Enforce, part number 438. I don't remember where I found this, but I use it sparingly because you don't find it in the parts stores. I actually had to order it, I think. But man, it's like thick and foamy, and it doesn't run off as easy. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer to break stuff loose, but usually I use this for the stuff that's gonna be hard to break loose anyway. Highly recommend it. Not sponsored again. It's just something I've had for quite a while, and it's always, when I had something that I couldn't get loose, this stuff breaks it loose. So it's just a little note there. Here to help. That's one of the things I found that actually does work. So all right, so we'll continue on. All right, so I waited about 10-15 minutes, grabbed a beer, whatnot. So I've already actually broken all these loose. What I did is I used my big torque wrench. You could use a pry bar or whatever. Really wasn't much resistance at all. For this bottom one, I had to use this. Just used an 18 with a little short stubby socket. And then for the top three, I used a short stubby 15mm socket with that. Got them broke loose real easy. Really didn't even need that long. The only thing that made that handy, having that, was just not having to dig all the way down there. I was able to do it like that. So, because there's not really a good way to show that, I mean, all I'm doing is taking those three bolts out, or the bottom one. I'm not going to show this because there's really not a good thing. You're just going to watch me turning a ratchet. So once I get all four of them out, I'll be back. Okay, so So you can see the bracket's out. Took all of like 5 minutes, really. I just wanted to show this to kind of compare first, in case you forget, because all 4 bolts are different sizes. So the shortest bolt is this one right here. And this is kind of self-explanatory because the next bolt is just a hair longer, okay? Hopefully you can see that. Of course, then the next bolt is a 15 millimeter, and that's the longest one right here. And then of course you got your 18 millimeter with a washer that goes into the motor mount, right? The reason for this, why are these two? You would think just by looking at the bracket, but the dog bone engine mount has a support strut that goes on top of this. So this bolt's a little bit longer. It's kind of self-explanatory, but I just thought I'd cover it. Now, comparing these two. Let's get into it. Initially, so obviously, let me get over here so I can actually see what I'm looking at here. This webbing is thicker, obviously. You can kind of see side by side. Obviously, the top webbing right there is thicker. Dimensionally, they're about the same, but another piece that's also critical and what's most common to break is right there where the pivot, the alternator pivots on, or not pivots, but the slider. You can see how much thicker it is with the Fiero store one. So, all in all, should be a better piece. Mine's already this one's trash because that bolt, the threads on this part are galled up really bad from, I don't know if that older bolt was warped when I replaced it or what, but anyway, that's pretty much garbage at this point. This one, now that everything's broke loose, should go in even easier, aside from lifting it up in there. Now, at this point, I'm going to take a break and segue into my other video. I think I'm going to separate that as another video, just because I've got everything apart. But y'all won't even notice in this video. The next time you come back, this will be back on, because I'm just going to go ahead and put this back on. So, stay tuned. Okay, just to give you an idea, these are the bottom 2 bolt holes for the bracket. Going back in, I'm going to, you're going to want to probably do the top, get it up in there, and then get the top 2 started. That way you can, if you need to, pull that bottom bolt out, and then get it started up in there, because you know that is probably the tightest spot to work. And anyway, just a tip. I'm gonna try it out, see how it goes. So anyway, we'll see, but that's how it goes. Notice it's not quite centered. The pulley's not quite centered on the bracket. According to the directions, it's supposed to be lower in the bracket. The pulley should be lower than higher. So we'll get that going. And another easy way to tell is the 2 holes. The bottom one is bigger, which coincides with the motor mount bolt that's on the bottom. So anyway, let's get it started and get going. Okay. So as you can see, I've just barely got that bottom bolt in there, because I'm going to end up taking it back out. So I'm going to go back up top, get the top 3 started and going. Actually get the top 2 started, and then I will put the bracket in. I'll come back down, take this bolt out, put the bracket in, and get him going. Essentially, the last bolt I'm going to do is going to be that middle bolt, which will be the top bolt holding the bracket on for the pulley. So again, there's not much I can show you from here. You want to watch this wiring harness. It's got to go outside of the bracket, otherwise the bracket won't fit. But anyway, you can kind of, one nice thing is you can kind of tell if it's closely aligned because that dog bone. Here's the light. So you see this dog bone bracket here? You can kind of tell that it's fairly close to lined up. And actually that'll probably be the first one you want to put in. Then you can do the inner one because that one's kind of actually harder to get to, even though there's more hand room. So, let me get that going. I'll be back. Alright, so my camera's not really going to cooperate, but what I'm going to do, now that those two are out, or in up top, I'm going to take this bottom bolt back out, feed it through the idler pulley, and try to wedge this thing up in here so that I can do this with, and it's awfully tight. Okay, that's in there. I'm going to try and get this started back. Now that that's started, now we get to go back up top and tighten them down. I'll tighten the top three down, then I'll come back down and get the bottom bolt. Alright, so the next part would be for the pulley installation. These are 15s, that's a 19. But however, and normally what you do is take a 15 and loosen the slider bolt for the AC compressor and move the AC compressor in to get the belt off. However, I'm gonna first take the 13 millimeter, bust it loose for the clutch because I need to replace the clutch anyway. And I'm also gonna PB blast, or not PB blast, but use my enforced stuff since these look kind of rusted. Spray those up good so maybe they won't be such a pain. So bear with me and I'll be back. Well, that didn't quite work out as planned. My impact doesn't quite have enough juice to get it going. And so what I'm going to end up doing, I've already loosened this 15 for the slider bolt. So I'm just going to slide the compressor in. Maybe that's enough. I don't think so though. Not quite. So you saw what I'm doing there. These holes right here. Just you take a pry bar and pry the alternator or the compressor in and out and loosen the belt. So I'm going to be working on that, get this belt off, and then I will work on getting the pulley out. So stay tuned. The impact pulley, or the impact did wonders on the pulley bolts. So now I got to get the pulley off, and I'll be back. It's out. I just took a screwdriver and popped it right behind the AC part of the pulley. In between, just wedged it in between that and the harmonic bouncer. Came right out. So I'm going to take a break and mark my timing because I will be setting the timing on this. So I'm going to mark that and I'll show you how to do that real quick. So there's 3 timing marks on the harmonic balancer. Light. The main one is right here. It's the thicker of the 3. And then the other 2 are kind of off kilter. You can kind of see. So I'm just going to take a paint pen and mark those. This always ends up making a mess, but it's for science. And this is just like a touch-up paint pen that I've had for a while for my Cobra and my Lightning. So all that, I'm smearing it, so I'm going to have to fix that. We want it fairly fine. Okay. The main one is the thick one. So I'm going to mix that off real quick. Try and get the excess off. So apologies, my camera battery died. But more or less, got paint on the 3 markers. I wiped the most of the excess off. It's close enough. It's just a guideline. So, putting the new pulley on, you're going to want to clean that off best you can. So there is a keyway, but it doesn't really matter because the new pulley isn't keyed. You just want to kind of line it up with the holes. It kind of just slides on there. In fact, it doesn't want to stay. So what I'm going to do is get a couple of the pulley Allen bolts. Uses Allen bolts because a hex bolt, there's not enough room on the new pulley for a hex bolt to fit. So it's usually a case with underdrive pulleys. So I'm going to get one started so it doesn't fall off. It fell, but it's not. I can't get back on there. As you can see, it's just, once I get all these started, I'll run them up with the impact because I don't feel like using a ratchet. You could do it with an Allen. You'd have to, you know, think of like a 8 or a 10 or 8 or 9 size on the Allen head is what it needs. I highly recommend you get, if you have to deal with anything that uses Allen bolts, just get a hex head kit for a ratchet or a there we go. No, it's not wanting to. So hopefully, there. Alright. Now I'm just going to run these up in a star pattern with my impact, because I have a head for this. And then you need to tighten the other one. Now, what I'm going to do is run up this guy. There. Now you can check against the harmonic balancer to see like, you see how it's not lined up, so I got to start over. You see how it's not even? That means that the pulley is not straight. So I have to go back, loosen these up, and get it straight. So I'm not going to make you watch that. I'll be back. Okay, so took a little assembly lube, lubed up the hole in there, and the hub portion. I'm going to try this the other way now. Try and run it up with the main pulley. Not to say that it's the fault of the Rodney Dickman part by any means. It could be that my harmonic balancer on this car is slightly galled up. Didn't feel like it, but you never know. So, that being said, let's try to tighten this up so that it'll okay, so try and take a rubber mallet. It's not wanting to go in, so I may have to do some sanding on the pulley itself. That seems to be fairly even right now. But as soon as I tighten it, it's gonna wanna it wants to back off. Now, I'm going to try working it with a mallet. It seems to be right where the keyway was on the harmonic balancer that's snagging, so I'm just going to get most of these started, but I'm going to try and tap it so it doesn't come loose. This is the side that keeps wanting to come loose, so I'm going to run it up snug. Alright, so now I just need to run up the Allen bolts. It's actually already, it's in there now. So okay. Hit the center again, just for GP. There we go. Now, checking again for uniformity. I have to move y'all because so there is a gap, but the serpentine pulley is lined up, and so is the V-rib. So you can see there is a gap, but it also is a smaller diameter pulley, so that kind of makes sense actually. But if I hung a string off that edge, off the top edge of that one, these pulleys are lined up, so I'm not too worried at this point. They're on there tight. So as far as the pulley installation goes, it would just be reinstalling everything. However, I'm still trying to figure out my AC compressor clutch. I think I might end up having to just assemble it back together because I've got to find a way to break this loose without it moving, and my impact does not quite have enough meat on it to break that bolt loose, and I can't just turn it because it'll just spin the pulley. So stay tuned, I'll be back. now the next step is just going to be reverse order, putting the alternator back in the car, starting with actually getting it up in there, which the 130 amp is a little bit heavier, so it is kind of a little bit more of a pain, and it's a little bit bigger, so I have to just finagle it up in there and make sure not to get the wires crossed. Okay. And of course, that bolt is not where I need it to be. So, because I'm up under here, I'm gonna just put the slider bolt, try to feed it up in there, blind, but just to get it started so the alternator won't fall. Okay, now, as you can see, it's easier said than done, but the real trick is getting it up in the pivot hole. So once I get it up in there, which is a tight fit, so I'm gonna have to probably force it up in there. Ideally, you'd want to do the pivot bolt first, but it's just so hard to get it up in there. Okay. Gonna get the new pivot bolt. You're really not gonna be able to see much, but one thing that helps is to get a driver. I'd rather do this while the car was on the ground, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, right? And you see it wasn't even close. So this is the fun part. That's probably what happened to my previous bracket. This slider really needs to come out first. So let me figure this out. Because right now I'm just trying to get this up in here so that I can get the bolt in, and that proves to be fairly difficult in where it sits. So I'll be back. Alright, so it's all up in there connected. Got my ground strap up in here. Got my positive wires up. Got both the pivot bolt and the other bolt in. I've got them started anyway. Word to the wise, this bracket with this alternator doesn't quite line up. It's quite a fight getting this bolt. It's like this just needs to be clearanced a little bit on this shaft. I don't know if that's just because of mine. I don't know. So all that would really be next is getting the belts on and getting them tight, and then putting, you know, the battery back in and the wheel well liner and all that stuff. However, I am still trying to get the AC compressor bracket off, so I will be, or the clutch for the AC compressor, so I'm going to be fighting that for a little bit still. Anyway, that should just about do it, so stay tuned. So one thing I'm going to do, or what I'm going to do next, is put the new belt on. I'm going to hang on to this belt cover for reference and future later use, because belts do go out. And basically I'm going to start feeding this through. Deciding the easiest way to do this, yeah, sorry, not caffeinated enough yet this morning and it's cold. So looking up under here, kind of almost makes the most sense to feed this like so. Get it up over the crank, or the water pump, I'm sorry. Get up over that. Of course, the belt is very stiff because it's new and it's cold. There we go. Maybe that'll help. I'm not going to be able to do this one-handed, so I'll be back. Okay, so the belt is on, sort of. It's all the way routed, and I got to tighten it. Normally, you could take a 17mm back here, but this belt is it's pulled pretty tight, so I'm gonna have to take a pry bar and pry the belt tight, and then I will tighten that bolt up. So, hang on. All right, so the belt seems to be tight. Before we get the car down on the ground, though, oh, looks like we got a package coming. Well, I'll be back. False alarm. Wasn't for me. All right, so as I was saying, before we go putting this car all the way back together and get it on the ground, I'm going to hook up the battery and give it a test start to see if the belt squeals and to make sure it's charging. So if I can ever get this terminal threading. Anyway, I'll be back when I get the battery in. So change clothes real quick, just so I don't get the seats dirty. And we'll just see here. See if she squeaks. Now, one thing you'll notice, and I'll be covering this in a later video, is my temperature gauge pegs on startup. Sometimes you can tap it and it'll come back down. Other times it won't. But I got parts on the way to fix that. So, yeah. I'm not gonna run it for too long because I have some more work to do elsewhere on the car. So, yeah. Let me get back to putting the wheel well liners in and getting the wheel on and all that stuff, and I'll be back. All right, well, sorry, I had to clear my throat. All right, so at this point, the job is done. You can put the vent back in, get the car back on the ground. I'm not doing that because I'm going to be changing the oil here shortly. So just do purge with one stone type thing. All in all, you know, I think it took me like three or 4 hours total. But if I wouldn't have messed with that AC compressor, probably wouldn't have taken me any time at all. So, you know, probably figure on a 3 hour to 4 hour job if you have all the tools lined out, ready to go, and you kind of know where you're going with it. If not, you could probably spend days doing that. But not too bad. I got several things put on. Didn't get the AC going like I hoped, but I'll get that done in a later date. So, yeah, that pretty much is a wrap for this one. If you enjoy this stuff or find it helpful at all, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Those comments are more motivational than you would realize when you find out, you know, someone actually got, you know, found help out of what you know, out of the effort. So yeah, like I said, as always, till next time, I'll be back.